Hello and welcome to All About Bikes, and today finally we are going to tell you which is a better buying option, the Royal Enfield Meteor 350 or the Honda CB350 H'Ness. But that's later in the video. First, I think we'll straight away get into questions, and we'll start with what you've asked us on Instagram. Now the first question on Insta is from Johan, and he wants to know whether the Apache 180 is a good motorcycle to buy. He's looking at a motorcycle that does can tour at about 85 to 95 kilometers per hour, and now the Apache 180 is an older motorcycle, old chassis, old engine, all of that. Of course, it's been upgraded for BS6, old styling. But if you like that look of the motorcycle, I think it will do 80 to 95 kilometers per hour. It will tour at that speeds, no problem there. It would hit 100 kilometers per hour as well. So if you like that motorcycle, sure, you can go for that. Next up, we've got Vikrant, and he's asked us what's the best bike to buy for about 1.3 lakhs. And we've got a similar question from Atul. Same thing, I mean, they're both looking for good mileage, looks, they're looking for a motorcycle that's great in the city. My suggestion here would be to go for the Hero Xtreme 160R. It's a light motorcycle, it's an efficient motorcycle, it's a fun to ride bike, and the seat height is pretty low, so you'll be able to get both your feet firmly on the ground, decent brakes. So no real complaints on that motorcycle, and given Hero, you have a wide service network as well. Next, we've got Dhaval, and he is 5'10". He wants a motorcycle that he wants to use for daily commute and weekend rides. He says his budget is about 2.2 lakhs. What should he go for? Now, for 2.2 lakhs, you can go for motorcycles like the Gixxer 250 or the FZ25. These are larger capacity motorcycles, but you're new to motorcycling, so we'd recommend that you start with something smaller. Maybe the Gixxer 155. It's a light, easy to ride motorcycle. It's peppy enough, and you should be able to tour on it as well. Not very fast, but I think at acceptable levels. And it's a motorcycle that will aid your riding. It will help you improve your riding. So that's what you're looking for. You could, of course, go for the 250s, but our recommendation would be to start with a 150 or a 160. It would be a more sensible option. Ashish is asking us, he's got two options. He says, which one should I pick? Should I take the BMW G310R or the KTM 250 Duke? And his requirements are a motorcycle that he's going to use for commuting in the city daily, and then he's going to do about 200-300 kilometers over the weekend. So between these two, my preference would be the BMW. Compared to the KTM, it's a motorcycle that's more alive. It's a lot easier to ride in the city because it's a lot more nimble. And now with the BS6 update, it's become more refined compared to the older motorcycle. So between these two, I would say the BMW G310R makes more sense. And now let's take some questions from Facebook, and we've got Gokul, who wants to know if the Ninja 300 BS6 will be launched. Well, it makes sense for Kawasaki to launch the BS6 300. They've already launched a lot of their larger capacity motorcycles, and Ninja is one of their, or Ninja 300 is one of their mainstays in India. It's a market that they're reasonably serious about, so I think we should see the 300. Balaji wants to know which is a better motorcycle to go for, the Pulsar 160 or the Apache RTR 164V. Between these two, the Apache is a nicer motorcycle in our books. It is a lighter motorcycle, it is a better balanced motorcycle, and in terms of the design, in terms of quality, and also the engine characteristic, I would say the Apache 160 is something that makes more sense than the Pulsar 160. Siddharth wants to know, is there a recommended aftermarket exhaust for the Jawa Perak? Well, we don't really know. We know very little about the Jawa Perak apart from its specs, because we haven't even seen the motorcycle in the flesh, forget about riding it. And overall, I think aftermarket exhaust is not something that we really recommend. unless you need it for a specific purpose. We understand that if you put it on a motorcycle for performance, that you're not going to be using on the road as much, if it's not too loud and it helps the performance characteristic of a motorcycle, great. But what you get in the market right now, majority, is just freer flowing, louder exhaust or end cans, which we don't really recommend. Varun wants to know what could he buy as a used motorcycle for 80 to 90 thousand. He says he's 6 feet and he wants a motorcycle that he can commute on daily. Now 80 to 90, you will be able to get a wide variety of motorcycles depending on how old the motorcycle is. Given your height, you could, you haven't said that what is your preference, but you could look at the Duke. You are getting Duke 390s also for that money. You will get a newer Duke 250 for that money. So that's a motorcycle, and the newer ones are slightly, they have slightly more open seating triangles. So if you're tall, that makes sense. You could also look at an Impulse, for instance. It'll be a lot cheaper in that sense. And then you've got Dominars that you can look at. So you have a fair amount of options to choose for. If you were more specific, or if you had, if you've got a more specific idea in mind what sort of motorcycle, then we can help you further. Anil wants to know which is the better bike to go for, the Dominar 250 or the Gixxer 250. He says he will use it essentially in the city and maybe an occasional touring outing. So the Gixxer 250 certainly is the better of the two if you're going to use the motorcycle mainly in the city. If you want to use the motorcycle for touring and if you want a little more style into it, you could look at the Gixxer 250 SF as well. The Dominar 250 is the heavier motorcycle, less efficient motorcycle, better for touring certainly, but since your need is essentially for riding in the city, we'd say the Gixxer 250 is the better option. Now Dinku's asked us to talk about the Yamaha XSR, a motorcycle that a lot of people have asked about, and we've constantly said that no, we have no idea when it's coming to India. So he said, could you say that it's not coming and why it's not coming, and if it would ever make it to India. So if it would ever, I mean, if it would it ever come to India? Yes, it makes sense given that they have the MT-15 and it's essentially the same motorcycle with more retro styling on. But has Yamaha indicated that they're going to launch the XSR in India? No. Do we have any idea whether they will? No. So as things stand today, the XSR is definitely not on the cards as we know it. And now let's take some questions off Twitter. We've got Farhan, who's asking us how good is the Himalayan BS6, and he's planning to buy it in about in February 2021. A good motorcycle, the Himalayan BS6, a little heavier than the BS4, but big improvements in braking and refinement. Overall, it's a motorcycle what it should have been at the start. Now it's a motorcycle that we can easily recommend. We've not had any issues reliability wise or engine gearbox related. Everything's become a lot better now, and it's a motorcycle that you can comfortably own and enjoy. Manik has asked us, is there any news on the Honda CBR? You haven't said with CBR 250, 650, the 1000RR is already here, but for the other two, Honda will probably get the 650 BS6 if it's not already available. And the 250, there is no news. It might not make sense right now. Clearly, they have gone in a different direction with the CB350, and that's where they feel that the numbers would come from. Of course, looking at Royal Enfield and what they've done, no real race replica 250 and above has really done big numbers. So maybe we won't see Honda launching that anytime soon. And now let's take questions from our YouTube video that we did last week. And so first we've got Ashraf, and he says that he is looking at the Royal Enfield Meteor. He's a little concerned about the maintenance of the bike. He currently rides or owns an Activa. So let me just draw a comparison between maintenance cost of the Meteor and the Activa. Now the Activa has got a smaller engine, the Meteor's got a bigger engine, so clearly Meteor will consume more oil. Activa runs your regular mineral oil while the Meteor runs a semi-synthetic oil, so automatically the cost for oil is more. You've also got the labor cost for the Meteor will be a little higher because of the way it's been designed. So the mechanics need to do a few more things before they can get to, let's say, if they want to do tappet setting, for instance, it's probably easier or less labor intensive for like an Activa compared to the Meteor. So again, labor costs would also be higher for the Meteor, but overall the maintenance cost for the Meteor is not going to be sky high, because while in an Activa, for instance, you'd probably be getting service done and oil changed every 2,000 to 3,000 kilometers. For the Meteor, it's 10,000 for an oil change. So clearly you're going to spend more time, and the frequency of service would be higher on the Activa, less on the Meteor. But of course, all of that put together, you're buying a more expensive motorcycle, you're buying a larger capacity motorcycle, more power, more torque, and that's a little trade-off, that the maintenance cost will be a little more than the Activa, but it's not like it's going to be hugely more, and it might seem very, very, like difficult. So Nandu Krishnan wants to know whether he should go for the XPulse or the RTR 200. He's looking for comfort, for pillion and rider, and a bit of off-roading as well. So clearly, since you've said you are looking at a bit of off-roading, then the XPulse makes way more sense than the RTR. If you were looking at a motorcycle specific for city purpose, then the RTR makes more sense, because it's a tighter motorcycle in the way it rides. It's got sharper steering geometry, so it reacts to your inputs better. It's a more involving motorcycle to ride, but XPulse is comfortable and manageable in the city, more than manageable really, and it's reasonably efficient. And then off-road, of course, there is absolutely no comparison. The XPulse is way, way better than the Apache, so XPulse it is. We've got Ramesh, who's asking us why is Kawasaki not willing or not wanting to launch the ZX25 in India, and he says, what's the reason for that? Well, the reason is quite simple. When the ZX25 comes to India, the list price will be so expensive for a 250 that nobody would want to pay that sort of money, and it doesn't make sense then for Kawasaki to bring that motorcycle, because once it brings it, it's under 800cc, so it'll have to get it homologated, so there's costs involved, etc. It just doesn't make sense at all. Next question is from Aditya, and he says that he likes to go for a 100-kilometer ride twice a month. He's looking for a motorcycle that he'll use for daily commutes. His budget is 2 lakh rupees, and he is looking at the RS 200. He says, is the build quality questionable for or on Bajaj motorcycles, and is there something better that he could look at, like the Apache or another 250cc? So I would say, if you like the RS 200, it's a nice motorcycle. I mean, it's one of the better motorcycles to have come off Bajaj's production line. Not the best looking, of course, but in terms of, I mean, mechanically and engine-wise, it was, I remember we'd done a comparison long time back when the RS 200 had come out with the Apache 200 at that time, 4-valve, and we'd picked the RS because it was just a nicer motorcycle overall in terms of refinement, in terms of the way it delivered power and ride and handling, the balance. So if you like the RS 200, certainly go for it. It's like we said, it's one of the better motorcycles to have come out of Bajaj, so absolutely go for it. Now Hari Anand wants to know that if TVS were to give the Apache a 6-speed gearbox, would it help improve its top speed? Now there are a lot of things that go behind improving, or if you want to improve the top speed of your motorcycle. Of course, gearing is an important aspect. Now when you do a 6-speed gearbox, what it allows you to do is that it allows you to have closer ratios between each gearbox, each gear. So you can get away with a motorcycle engine that is not very torquey, because it allows you to be in the power band. Now the TVS's engine is already a torquey motor, and that's why TVS didn't feel the need to have a 6-speed. What is going to happen with the 6-speed is that you're going to have 2 overdrive ratios at the end instead of having 1, which is the 5th. And so it's not really going to help you get better top speed. Chances are that your top speed would still come in 5th gear. The other way to do that probably is to use like a smaller sprocket at the back, or overall the final drive ratio needs to be lower in terms of the number, and that would probably allow you a higher top speed, but again that would depend on how much the engine in its top gear is able to, I mean, what sort of torque is available for it to be able to go past whatever the resistance that it's getting at that speed. So we wouldn't say that that's like a sure short way of getting higher top speed, but of course it's possible. Jiva is asking us if he's going to buy a used motorcycle, what sort of things he should look at closely. So a good thing would be to, of course, hear the engine, see if it's making some odd noises. You would probably hear tappet noises, which is fine, but if you hear piston slapping noises, that's not a good thing. You should try to roll it off with the clutch to see what sort of slippage you're getting. You should see what the gear shifts are like, and of course it won't be as good as in a new motorcycle, but if you struggle with any of these aspects, then you know that there's going to be a lot of work. It's also a good idea to just get the panels off and see what sort of rust there is on the chassis and parts, because it will require a very understanding seller for you to be able to do all this. But I mean, if you really want to buy a good used motorcycle, that's the way to do it. Also look at the tires, look at the age of the tires, look at the amount of wear there is. If there is little wear and the tires are cracked, then you know it's a motorcycle that's not used a lot, so it might be a nicer option to go for. But again, it depends. Look at the chain, the state of the chain, the slack in the chain. Look at where the adjuster for the chain is. If is it completely out, then you know that you're going to need to spend on the sprockets and the chain. So these kind of things, oil marks here and there, these are the things that you need to look for. The body panels being dented and all that, and the paint being scraped is not something that should put you off, because it might be a nice mechanical motorcycle underneath, and that's what you want. You don't want a better looking motorcycle, you want a motorcycle that's more mechanically sound. Siraj has asked us, he's a Honda fanboy and he has a Unicorn and he wants to upgrade to the H'Ness, so he wants to know whether you should go for the H'Ness or the Meteor. So Siraj, we will discuss that at the end, towards the end of the video, so watch out for that. Your answer will probably be in that discussion there. Abhijit wants to know whether the Jawa Classic is a reliable motorcycle. He says, please elaborate now. Jawa is, I mean, we've ridden the motorcycle twice. We rode it on the first ride, and there were a lot of issues with the motorcycle then, in terms of finish, in terms of quality. Then we rode the motorcycle here. We kept it for a few days and we rode it hard, and that motorcycle worked really well. And then we had another motorcycle that did not work as well. And we haven't really ridden the Perak. So, and we've not ridden the BS6 Jawa either. So, it's not a motorcycle that I can with complete confidence say that it's completely reliable. There's another reason for that, is that they're not producing that many numbers, they're not selling as many motorcycles. So if there are issues, they're not really coming up as much because the usage is not there. So yeah, I would say it's a risk to an extent, but if you like the motorcycle, I'm sure Jawa has things in place. They would probably know what is working with the motorcycle, what's failing, and they would probably have some systems in place to sort that out, because they want to continue to build the brand. But I can't honestly confidently say that the Jawas are completely reliable motorcycles, and that's completely and only down to lack of usage on our part. We haven't lived with the motorcycle long enough, and they haven't sold enough for people to come back or for us to hear that there are issues or no issues on the motorcycle. Ashwin is asking us, would the Honda CB300 get relaunched? Well, we're not really sure. It didn't do well last time it was out on sale. And right now, I guess Honda's focus is on the CB350, which is essentially similar capacity, different outlook, and maybe that's the line they want to take, and they feel that that's where they might get more success compared to a sportier, expensive street naked. Yashwant wants to know the difference between a box section swing arm and an aluminium swing arm, and he wants to know about reliable bikes under 2 lakh rupees. So First, box section swing arm and aluminium swing arm. So box section swing arm is essentially the shape. Now, if you go back to the late 90s, early 2000s, go back to 100, 125cc motorcycles, we had tubular swing arms, and the idea was, I mean, they were cheap to manufacture, they were lighter. That's what you were looking for. You were looking for fuel efficiency, and the speeds were not there. You didn't have the tires for handling and all of that, so you were getting away with that. Then, of course, we had the new breed of motorcycles, the 200s, the 250s, and suddenly you needed a lot more rigidity against, when you're instead of the bike doing all sorts of things. You want some amount of flex in the front end of the chassis to give you feel, but you want your swing arm to be as rigid as possible to prevent any sort of twisting. And that's where I think box section came on, because it was more rigid than a tubular one. They were essentially hollow box section swing arm. And then aluminium is the more expensive option, but it is the lighter option, and it is, if designed well, is probably more rigid than your box section swing arms that are made out of steel metal. So that's where it is. We saw, I think, in an affordable motorcycle, we saw aluminium swing arm come into the R15, the first generation, second generation, and clearly there was a big difference in the handling, and that's what you want to use aluminium swing arm for, to add rigidity, to reduce weight, and to give it more dynamic prowess, especially for motorcycles that are more powerful. And as for a reliable bike under 2 lakh, we have been recommending the Hero Xtreme 160R. It's a great motorcycle, so that's a good option to go for. The Apache 160R, 160 RTR, 4-valve is something that we've used extensively, no issues there. That's again a reliable motorcycle, so these are your options. Kunal has asked us which is the best choice in the 160 segment. Again, his options are 160 and the Xtreme. So like we said at the earlier part of the video and a little before that, you can go for the Xtreme. Rajesh wants to know which of the two should he go for, the XPulse 200T or the Xtreme 200S. Between the two, we like the Xtreme 200S. It's a motorcycle that's sportier, that's nicer looking. We've ridden it on a racetrack. It works on the racetrack, it works in the city. The reason to buy the 200T would be if you want slightly relaxed ergonomics, you want a bike that looks different from the crowd, but our pick would be the Xtreme 200S. Now that's a wrap on questions, but we left one out from, it came to us on Facebook, and it's from Mudit, and he wanted to know, or he wants to know, what is the difference between power and torque in a motorcycle, and what works better, higher power or higher torque. Though his question is, should the bike have high power and torque or high power with low torque? So firstly, power and torque are related to each other. They are directly proportional. Just to give you an example, torque is the amount of work that something can do. So if I were to lift this telephone, let's say this was 20 kgs, and if I were to pick it up, my ability to pick up that 20 kgs is my torque, right? How fast I pick it up and take it to the level, that's the power. So if I were to take it like this, it would be lesser power. If I were to take it like this, it would be more power. So essentially, power is the rate at which the torque that you're applying and how fast, or it's a time-bound equation to torque. So they're completely related. So if you're looking for a high power, high torque motorcycle, yeah, that's what it works at. But if you're looking, now another example would be, let's say, a tractor, lots of torque, lower down, a race car, lots of power, right up there. You're not going for speed with the tractor, you're going for fast lap times with the race car, you're looking for lugging ability with the tractor, you're looking for like higher top speeds with the race car. So it's essentially that, but they are related. If I were to buy a motorcycle with high torque at low RPM, then I know it'll be very easy to ride at low revs in the mid-range. If I buy a motorcycle with high power at high revs, then I know that I'll have to wring the engine all throughout to extract that, otherwise it will just feel dead in the low and mid range. So that's the thing. So if you are looking for a city motorcycle, then high torque at lower and mid range is good. If you're looking for something for a racetrack, race replica, then of course power coming at higher RPM helps, because you're going to be gutting in any case. I hope that answers your question. And now let's talk about what we said at the start. Should you buy the Meteor 350 or should you buy the Honda H'Ness CB350? On paper, these motorcycles look very similar, but the riding experiences are very different, and it shows a bit in the way the power and torque is developed. The Meteor is a more comfortable motorcycle, is a more torquey motorcycle, low and mid-range. It's much easier to ride in that sense. The Honda, you need to rev it a little more for you to be able to extract the sort of performance. It might have a neoclassic look, but I think it still has a soul of a city bike, of a bike that wants to, is more is in a hurry of sorts, while the Meteor is a more relaxed motorcycle designed, and it works really good for cruising. Between the two, we'd say the Meteor makes more sense. It's a motorcycle that has more appeal in terms of having a good storyline. You are buying not just a motorcycle but a lot with it, and it's an established thing, and it's a big deal for Royal Enfield. If anything were to go wrong, Royal Enfield would probably do whatever it takes to sort that out, because it is its bread and butter. It is defined by this segment, this engine, this class of motorcycles. For Honda, CB350 is just another motorcycle, something that it's experimenting with so that it can take some market share from Royal Enfield, and that's the reason that it's also not available in its regular showrooms. It's only available in its big wing. So clearly, if you're looking at something in the long run, for us, all indications and of course the way the bikes are, we'd say the Meteor 350 makes more sense. Hopefully this answers and settles the debate, which one should you go for. And thank you so much for watching. That's all from us this week, and we'll see you next week.